Good morning, Let Your Culture of Safety Line Team. I hope everybody's doing well today, and I hope you're enjoying these Lineman Safety National webinars we started almost 4 years ago. And today, Mr. Derek Sang is back for the third time, and he represents Bulwark, safety apparel, ARC-rated, fire-resistant clothing, just like this right here, Bulwark, right here. So, great stuff. I consider Derek the expert out of the whole industry when it comes to your ARC-rated and your fire-resistant clothing. And he's going to be talking about the care, he's going to talk about selection and all the things, what's the why and the how behind the clothing. It's very detailed. It's one, I would say, a lot of safety conferences, leadership conferences, the one thing I think they lack a lot of is the technical speaking. Every person that speaks, you don't want to hear just safety, leadership, and all those soft skills. It is important as far as the leadership and the safety that we also grab a hold and embrace the technical part, the technical aspect of our industry and what we do. And that way, when we're out in the field, we have some experience, we have some expertise, and we know more what to look for. So we're better and better equipped to be safer. So it just makes sense. So Mr. Derek, he came here about 3 years ago, almost to the day. And he gave us, we were talking about, I think it's episode 11. He was one of the very first speakers. So I appreciate him coming here again, representing Bulwark. He's in this cold climate of South Carolina, coming from Arizona, and it's hard for him to handle this. But Derek, I appreciate you being here, brother.
Brent, always good thing. Thank you so much for having me again. And as Brent said, for the third time, and it really is amazing when you look back on our all the sponsors, all the members, all the folks that are part of this. I told Brent, I go, you really need to show the first one for the few, and we were one of the few that get in there, and how much this has grown. So Brent, congratulations to you. It's always awesome to see how far ECOS has come and where we're going. So with that, today we're going to talk about protecting against the arc, specifically your flame-resistant and your arc-rated clothing, the proper selection, use, care, and maintenance of that arc-rated clothing. I always like to give a brief introduction, who's talking to you today. As Brent said, my name is Derek Sang. My title today is the Senior Technical Training for Bulwark Protective Apparel. The cool thing with that is I'm not attached to sales. I don't have a sales quota. Really, my role is educating wearers and those that are making decisions on the proper selection, use, care, and maintenance of flame-resistant and arc-rated clothing. I got started back in this crazy market about 25 years ago now. I've been the last 15 years with Bulwark. I tell folks all the time, I got started when you could get any style, any color of navy blue Nomex coverall you wanted. And none of my utility folks back in the 90s were really wearing this stuff. So we've come a long way. So with that, how do I like to begin these types of educational formats? And Brett, thank you for setting the stage so high, so hopefully I can meet the expectations. But before I begin, I always ask my audience, raise your hand, who's responsible for safety? And you hear a little bit of clutterings, you see a few hands up. Then I ask, who is responsible for your safety? And the hands all go up, because why? We are our own safety managers. So with that, as safety folks, we love our numbers. I always ask folks, 99.99, those are numbers. Are those any good? Well, you have no context. So let me give you some context. At the age of 25, you step into your utility. Fast forward 10 years, you've been 99.99% successful at avoiding lost time injury. And I ask you that again, is that good? And you'll hear some smatterings, then most people agree, yeah, that's good. Well, it might be so good that you'd get an email, an award, an accommodation, your $25 Starbucks gift card sent to you by your employer saying, thank you for your commitment to safety. Obviously, this is more than just words on paper. You've actually proved that safety is your goal and a way of life. Thank you very much. So let's look at what 0.01% can look like. Well, I was a lineman for 10 years. Not the kind of lineman you all are thinking about. I was this kind of lineman. Yes, some 35 years ago, and as my kids remind me all the time, ancient times, brag on these guys a little bit. Probably our greatest accomplishment today is 35 years later, we're still friends and we're still all above ground. That being said, what did that 10-year career mean to me at 0.01%? Well, I'll give you an idea. You look at my job description, which was pretty simple, pretty easy. Stop other angry human beings from getting to my running back or my quarterback. Pretty simple job description. I roughly had 30,000 contacts, 30,000 interactions. How I want you to think about that is think about the stuff you tell your kids, your significant other, your loved ones when they say, "What do you do for a living?" This is the easy stuff. This is just the job description. This is just the standard SOP. Now, of those 30,000 interactions, I roughly had 3,000 that I would consider high risk. That's the stuff you don't tell your loved ones about. Those are the near misses. Those are those aha moments. Those are those things that could have got you but didn't. Well, high risk for me was turning a corner and finding this hyper athlete somewhere in the middle of that gridiron. Now, we would find each other and we would have an intentional 10-mile-an-hour collision 3,000 times. I turned the corner at 4 miles an hour because I was big and fat. He found me going about 6, 7 miles an hour because he's a way better athlete than I am. We roughly had 3,000 10-mile-an-hour collisions over that 10-year period. What did that look like? What was my 0.01%? Well, for me, and I'll tell you about how we got to this easily 20 concussions. With that, 2 knee surgeries and elbow surgery, torn bicep tendon from the bone, torn hamstring from the bone. Separated both my AC joints, 3 broken ribs, dislocated all my fingers, including my thumbs, 2 high ankle sprains, and documented knocked out twice. Those were all lost time injuries. Whether that was one play to pop my fingers back into socket, or that was 6 months after coming off the operating table, those were all lost time injuries. Interesting side note, how I found out about the concussions, because in my day, we didn't have concussion protocol. We had smelling salts and get back on the field. So about 5 years after my career, I had to go get some eye surgery. So I had to go to the ophthalmologist. He took an x-ray of my head. Sitting in the waiting room, he comes out and he throws the x-ray up on the big lighted board. He goes, "What car accident were you in?" I go, "Never been in a car accident." He goes, "Motorcycle accident." I go, "At that time, never been in a motorcycle accident." He goes, "What have you been doing?" And I thought about it because it wasn't readily apparent. And I go, "Well, I played football for 10 years. And he goes, "That's it." He goes, "Come here." So he walks me over to the x-ray and he goes, "See all those little white lines on your forehead?" And there was a lot of them. I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Every one of those is a healed fracture. Every single one of those is a concussion." So that's how I found out about my 20 concussions. This is just the stuff that took me off the field or put me in the operating table. So I think it's a Lifetime Injury Achievement Award. So I was pretty good at getting hurt. So what will your 99.99 look like? Is 99.99 good enough? What will your 0.01% look like after 10 years? Now the good news is you don't have to intentionally get in harm's way. You can move into a better ergonomic condition. We have better tools today. We have far greater education on how to better take care of those knees, backs, and all those other hazards that come up with that. So why am I here? Well, real simple, and how I can equate it to you, and this will make sense here in the next couple of slides. My work environment changed, and I did not recognize it. And how this is going to factor into what you all do on a daily basis, will your work environment ever change? And we'll talk about that in a second. I didn't recognize it and my career ended. So what happened was, we used to run a specific play. It was called a tray counter. Guard would pull, tackle would pull, running back would run up through the hole. Well, we had been running it a certain way all through the first half very successfully. I was kicking out the outside containment. We would run the ball up the inside. At halftime, their defensive coordinator wanted to stop getting beat by that play. So they changed that technique for that outside contain to what was called a knife technique. Basically, they took a half step forward and came crashing down the line of scrimmage to blow up what was ever in its way. That happened to be me. He took my head one way, took my neck the other way because I was in the wrong position. I did not recognize that my work environment had changed, and he blew up my brachial plexus. If you don't know what that is, that's the big nerve ganglia that sits underneath your trapezius. I lost my right arm for 18 months, hence my football career ended that day. Can your work environment change? This is just a short list of what our line workers can come up against. And I'm only going to talk about one of them today. And that one today we're going to talk about requires the proper selection of PPE because we're going to talk about arc flash. So with that, true or false, and I know you can't answer, but in your head, let me ask you a question. True or false? Do you wear this clothing, this PPE, to protect against arc flashes? I'll give you a second to think about it. Now, obviously, if the FR guy is asking this question, trick question, and you'd be absolutely right, because we don't wear this to protect against arc flashes. What do we wear it to protect against? If that is not the hazard, that is the ignition source. What is the hazard? If that question fundamentally is false, what is the hazard? The hazard is catching fire and continuing to burn. Arc flashes in on themselves, very intense, very hot, very, very short in duration. They fundamentally cannot hurt enough of us in the time that they're around to ultimately cause us to become a statistic or cause a line worker to be a statistic. And for this conversation, I mean fatality when I talk about statistic. So if I don't last long enough to ultimately hurt enough of you to cause you to become a statistic, what is happening? What does cause line workers in this hazard to become a statistic? Catching fire and continuing to burn. Taking something that fundamentally lasts for 1/10 of a second. A 6-cycle arc flash is an eternity if you're in it. 6 cycles is 1/10 of a second. So if the hazard is only a blink of an eye, what ultimately leads to catastrophic body burn and potential fatality is you have to catch fire and continue to burn. You have to take that event that fundamentally is 1/10 of a second in length and extend that to a 60, 90-second clothing fire. So why is flame-resistant arc-rated apparel needed? Because we take an event that is potentially fatal and we take that off the table. By not catching fire and continuing to burn, it is almost impossible to be a fatality in this particular hazard. Most all the severe burn injuries are from catching fire and continuing to burn. Hence, all the fatalities that potentially can come after that are clothing ignition initiated. By taking that off the table, that's what flame-resistant arc-rated clothing does. Now, this video here does not represent your hazard. What it is representing is the wrong fabrics to wear in a short duration thermal event. This is a flash fire simulation. This is a 3-second controlled burn, obviously with non-FR fabrics. As you're looking at the screen on the right-hand side, that is your 6535. That is poly cotton. On the left, that is 100% industrial cotton. It burns hot and heavy for a long, long time. And in fact, up until when? 2014, heavyweight cottons were allowed in our utilities. It wasn't until 2014, almost a decade plus now, that we actually regulated them out of the environment. So let's put the next slide into your environment. You're going to have what's called a controlled arc flash. Now understand, in this video, 8 inches of wire is the only fuel for this arc. Arc's fuel is metal. So think about all the electrical equipment that you work on that has metal in it. It's a lot more than that little piece of piano wire. So here we have a Faraday cage. Here you have half mannequins. These half mannequins are set up and we purposely cause an arc. Now you saw the screen flash, that arc is over. The event is over from an arc flash standpoint. On the right hand side you have arc rated clothing. doing exactly what you would want arc rating clothing to do. It self-extinguished. That fabric actually put itself out. There is no more injury. Compared to on the left, you had instantaneous cotton ignition. All that injury that's being caused now is from that fabric catching fire and continuing to burn. As this event would continue, that fire will use up all that fuel. Now, think about it in your environment. If you're unfortunate enough to be in a bucket and you are 20 feet in the air and you are on fire, how long does it take that bucket to get down? How long before we recognize that something's wrong and we need to get you out of the hazard? The hazard now is your clothing ignition. The arc is long gone. That ignition source is over. So as we pursue through this, what is flame-resistant clothing? The number one thing, and all it does, is it puts itself out. Regardless of the fiber-fabric combination, regardless of the technology, regardless if it has an arc rating, it has been tested to the hazard and it will put itself out. The fabrics today are natural or synthetic, and really what natural for moisture management, synthetic for strength and durability. We know that these garments are not inexpensive. We knew that you were making an investment, so we do want them to last. And secondly, we do want them to have a certain rate of comfortability there, and that's where we are mixing and matching the fibers. Notice they're designed to limit, not eliminate, injury. An arcing fault, you've all heard the numbers, roughly 35,000 degrees in that gap, 8 to 10,000 degrees as it comes out, 1 to 2 feet. Noise, you've got acoustic energy, you've got concussive force, and you've got everything that was metal in that piece of equipment now being vaporized and ejected out, re-solidifying in open air at 1900 degrees of molten metal shrapnel. All we're doing is putting ourselves out. All we're doing is limiting, not eliminating injury. That being said, the survival and extent of your injury directly correlates to how good the stuff was, how well you took care of it, and most importantly, if you're wearing it right. And we'll talk about all those things as we move forward. The biggest thing I've got to get my wearers to understand is this is secondary PPE. This is not primary. So if I have secondary, by default I have primary. The easiest example I can give you all of primary PPE is think of firefighters. Everybody fundamentally, when I say firefighters, has an image in their head. Big red truck, flashing red light. I've already donned the upper half of my bunker gear, lower half of my bunker gear. I've got specialized boots, specialized gloves, arguably the coolest hard hat in the trades. Ask any firefighter. Does now. It does not matter how good and how well rated and how much these garments exceed the standards, these boots exceed all the standards, I still can't go to work in my office. Now understand, my office burns between 400 and 800 degrees. That's where I go to work. I need one other important piece of PPE in order to go do my job. I need to be able to breathe in that fire. I don my SCBA, now I take all this purposely built PPE and I go to work. Knock down that fire, get back on that big red truck, head back to the station. I don't need to be wearing any of that PPE until the next alarm sounds. Why? It is task-based. I'm knowingly going into a thermal event and I dress accordingly. In your world, when do you need to be wearing it? And I would argue all the time. And I would argue all the time even when you're digging a hole, even when you're quote unquote working de-energized. Why? Because when you take it off and you put that shirt in the cab of your truck, or you leave that shirt on the back of that shovel that's sitting on that mound of dirt, you forget to put it back on. Because unlike that firefighter who purposely wears PPE to go into a thermal event, arc flashes are accidental. We do not purposely build electrical equipment to blow up. But does it blow up? Yes, it does. On the average of about 3,500 times a year, we have significant arc flashes. Of that 3,500, we roughly have about 600 to 800 significant burn injuries from those to our electrical workers. So when do we need to be wearing it? All the time. Because It can be the best stuff, but if you don't have it on and if you haven't taken care of it, it's not going to protect you as well as it could. That being said, I always get a little bit of pushback from my hierarchy and control folks, and I agree with them 100%. Derek, we want to eliminate the hazard. Absolutely. We want to substitute for it. Definitely. We would love to engineer it out. Absolutely. If we have to be there, we want to follow the best electrical safe work practices. Yes to all of the above, but here is my caveat to that. If there's an arcing fault happening right now, and you're unfortunate enough to be participating in it, what access to all those controls do you have? All those controls are gone. Your ability to eliminate that arc flash is gone. You definitely can't substitute for it. Your engineering controls are over and your electrical safe work practices have failed. You are participating in an arc flash. The only control you have left is what? The least effective and last line of defense, and that's your PPE. The silver lining is you are 100% in control of that last line of defense. What you wore into that arcing fault, you have 100% control of. Another analogy I like to use for folks is think of all the engineering controls that have come to bear in the automotive industry. Look at a car today being built in 2025 versus a car that was built in 2000. Go back another 25 years, 1975. You'll still see them on the road. A car built in 1975 versus 2025, what kind of engineering controls do we have today that we didn't have then? Well, a great example is that little smart car. That little smart car has a titanium frame. One of the strongest substances on the planet. Why? To protect the occupants inside that tiny car, because it occupies the same highways and byways as that behemoth on its roof. That little smart car, believe it or not, has 7 airbags. God forbid if they all go off at the same time. We have side view mirrors today that will audibly notify, visually notify that there's something in our blind spot. We don't even have to look over anymore. That's engineering. We have sensor arrays that if you're too slow to brake, it brakes for you. It'll literally allow you to push a button and put your boat in the water, stand outside your car, hit a key fob, and a car parks itself. With that, why are we still relying on 75-year-old technology? Why is this still mandated in every state in the Union, every province in Canada, and every modern industrialized country? It's 75 years old. Why is it not obsolete? It's a proven, life-saving piece of equipment. No matter how bad it is on this side of the windshield, it's still better than 25 feet down that asphalt. Ask any highway patrol officer survivability of ejection accidents. It's virtually nil. What is your safety belt in an arcing fault? Literally, the shirt and pant on your back is your last line of defense, as if that safety belt. Does it mean you won't get hurt? No. Does it mean that you've increased the probability of your survival? Absolutely. That is the mindset that we want to have with our flame-resistant arc-rated clothing. It is your last line of defense. And just like that safety belt, it's not going to work unless you're what? Wearing it and wearing it correctly. Another way to think about this and to help assimilate these types of programs into our all-day, everyday mindset. How many times have you clicked that safety belt and never used it for what it was intended for? Hopefully every time. From the time you're 15 to the time you're 75 and off my highways. That's 200,000 times, 300,000 times, 800,000 times. I don't know what the number is going to be for you, but it was only going to work if you've deployed it properly. Putting it on right before the accident is not going to help. Having it click behind your back, not going to help. The only way it helps is if you deploy it properly and you do it every time. And that's the mindset that we want to have with our flame-resistant arc-rated clothing. That all being said, we are 25 years, think of it, we are a quarter century into NFPA 70E. And I know from a utility world, we don't think about 70E. That's a general industry rule, but we're 25 years into this. In 2000, NFPA 70E came out and said you have to wear flame-resistant, at that time, clothing in front of energized electrical equipment. We are a decade plus now into the final rule. In 2014, we came out and said all our utility workers have to wear flame-resistant arc-rated clothing to a reasonable estimate of the incident energy that they're up against every single day. So why are we still talking about it? Why are we still having arc flash injuries in our electrical community? Why on average every single year do we see almost 100 fatalities and we see close to 600 to 800 injuries from this hazard every year? I have a very messed up algorithm. I will admit that to anybody. Stuff comes into my inbox and comes into my feed that's probably not normal. That being said, I don't have to try very hard to pull articles out that talk about electrical workers being hurt by this hazard. This is just last summer. This is from 2024. This is the months from, we're looking at May all the way through to October. That is just 5 months. Those were just significant articles where electrical workers were injured from this hazard.
A 22-year-old man from Stacy, Minnesota suffered life-threatening injuries on Monday when a charging station he was working on at a Brainerd gas area gas station exploded. The incident happened at the Holiday Station store on Delwood Drive in Baxter. According to a message from family and friends, Xavier Shavir was working as a high-voltage technician. He was testing a molded case circuit breaker of 400 amps, but was unaware the circuit was energized. He clamped onto the circuit, resulting in an arc flash incident, an explosion, and a fire. Shavir was airlifted from Brainerd to Hennepin County Medical Center in Minneapolis. He is in critical condition with full-body third-degree burns and various traumas from the blast. He was placed into a medical coma and is projected to stay in the hospital for 8 to 9 months with 40-plus surgeries for his skin. Currently, he is on a feeding tube and receiving oxygen to keep him stable.
Now, the good news from this event is he is out of the hospital now, a year later. His percentage body burn was not as high as it was reported. It was closer to 75. That's still being said. That's very, very significant, and he's got a long way to get to the end of his personal road. But the interesting part is I don't know what it takes to be a qualified high voltage technician. I don't know what training that he had up until that point. But the interesting fact is you pull the paragraphs from the actual news report, and what do they say? They said that he had from mid-thigh up to his neck, he had second and third degree burns. Notice that he only had first degree on his face. Where there was exposed skin, the arc was only able to injure up to first degree. Where he caught fire and continued to burn, that's what caused his second and third degree burns. Interacting with electrical equipment, at the very least, he should have had flame-resistant arc-rated clothing. The failure to have that is what caused all that additional injury.
The Virginia Beach Fire Department tells us they took a call here at the Bahama Breeze last Friday for an electrical fire. Master electrician James Warren was injured on the job and has second and third degree burns on 15% of his body.
It was pretty scary. Real bright flash, sparks everywhere.
4 days after an accident on the job caused an explosion to the face, James Warren is lucky to be alive.
Second and third degree burns, neck, face, forearms, and fingers.
In his 15 years.
Now, hopefully you heard the beginning of that report. What kind of electrician was James? Master electrician. Now, he was working in a fast food restaurant that was being reconditioned. It wasn't open to the public. Why was he working energized? You heard that he ran down the ladder and turned the equipment off. Why was it on to begin with? Secondly, do you see any PPE at all implemented in this event? A hard hat, a face shield, a balaclava, rubber gloves, leather protectors, arc-rated clothing, all the things that I just listed under NFPA 7E, where he was working in general industry in an energized environment, interacting with energized equipment, which is obvious because of the results of that interaction, without any PPE.
Around 9:15 a.m., 21-year-old Dax Nielsen, who was an electrical apprentice, was out with 4 electricians working on a transformer outside of a building northeast of West Valley City. Nielsen says they were pulling out wires that needed to be replaced for about 30 to 40 minutes before the explosion. Everything seemed normal. Then, in a split second, everything changed.
Next thing I know, like, zzz, boom, big flash explosion, just heat everywhere. Like, it was super hot, super fast. But I close my eyes, I roll to the ground, I stand up, and he's on the ground, on fire immediately.
Nick Dodge, Battalion Chief of West Valley City Fire Department, says he calls this a flash explosion and an electrical flash.
They've been noted to be thousands of degrees.
Nielsen agrees. It felt exactly like that.
Pretend you're standing there and then a lightning bolt hits something that's 2 feet from your face and it explodes.
Nielsen has third-degree burns on his ears, burns on his cheeks, and says his hair burnt off from the explosion.
Whole right side of my hat disintegrated, disappeared, and that's why I feel like that's where I got my good burn at. Real bad sunburn.
Officials say 2 of the electricians were transported to local hospitals in fair condition. Another 2 were treated and released at the scene. And one person, who Nielsen says was on fire after the explosion, was transported to University of Utah Health's burn center in critical condition.
I keep thinking about seeing him rolling on the ground screaming, his jacket literally ignited in flames. His skin's already falling off his lips. We were just sitting there. Boom. Day changed immediately.
In Harriman, Maya Constantino, Fox 13 News, Utah.
Well, that was a pretty gruesome description of what an arc flash can cause when there is no PPE deployed. We sent 2 to emergency room, we released 2 on site, we hurt a young apprentice just getting into the trades, and we sent 1 to a burn unit. And when you look at the equipment here, they were pulling wire through energized equipment on a weekend. Could they have talked to the utility and had it turned off? Could they have talked to the company and had it turned off? Could they have used some kind of rubber, insulation, isolation to prevent this pulling it through? That's number one. They could have done a lot of things to prevent before we ever got to PPE. The sad thing is when we do look at what they were wearing, none of that is arc rated. In fact, their ball caps melted and stuck to his head. His jacket instantaneously caught fire, causing horrific injuries, and he talked about that in that recording, how he saw his co-worker's face melting off. Imagine having to deal with that image as you're just entering into the trade as an apprentice. What did all these incidents have in common? Well, I've alluded to it a number of times in here, and it's an easy guess for you all on the other side here. No arc-rated PPE, none. It either wasn't issued, which is 100% in today, that's borderline criminal. That's all the regulations, all the standards say that the company is responsible for protecting their people. So if they didn't issue it, that's a huge problem. Where they issued it and weren't wearing it properly, well, that was not the case in any of these that we're aware of. Issued PPE and not wearing it at all, so it's sitting in the back of the van, it's sitting in the truck, I didn't need it today, someone else has got it and wearing it, or they thought the equipment was de-energized, so they didn't have to wear their PPE. All these could factor into what we just saw. So what are we trying to prevent? Well, I've talked about it a little bit, and that's burn injury, because burn injury is what ultimately leads to infection and organ failure and fatality in my burn units. So everybody understands fundamentally 1st, 2nd, and 3rd degree burns. Are you aware there's such things as 4th and 5th degree? We tell the general population about 1st, 2nd, and 3rd because that's all they really need to have to worry about for the most part. 1st degree is sunburn, 2nd degree is the onset of a blister, 3rd degree we're getting a little bit more precarious in the sense that now we're going to need special medical intervention. We're going to have to go to a special facility in a medical area called a burn unit where we're going to have skin grafts and additional procedures in order to heal those. But 4th degree is muscle and 5th degree is bone. We don't talk a lot about those because when you're triaged by my specialists, they're going to remove those as quickly as possible because that's dead tissue, it's not coming back, and I have to get it off in order to increase your chances of survivability. The next piece is extent. How much have you gotten? There's a huge difference between 50% body burn and 15% body burn, and it's not 35. 50% body burn dramatically decreases your chance of survivability. If you do survive with that extent of damage, increased alcoholism, increased divorce rates, increased drug dependency, increased suicide tendencies. You can think about it. When you have taken the largest organ in your body that's not only the biggest, but it's also the most forward-facing, every single social interaction, every single thing that goes forward that your identity is based on, you have severely altered. So as we look at that, we get into costs. Injuring folks today is very, very expensive. Burn injuries are extremely expensive. Arguably the second most costly procedures in any medical facility is burn injuries. If you wanted to find out, number one, neonatal intensive care. So you're not far behind on that. The easiest numbers we can think of, when you have 50% body burn, it's $1 million. Why? Because when I get you to my special facility, the time it takes for me to get you to potentially leave at one point under your own power, all the care and everything that goes into that is very, very expensive. And if you think about it, you've affected every single system in your body. First and foremost, your skin we've talked about, but you've also affected your circulatory system, your nervous system, your musculoskeletal system, your renal system. And those are all scrambling for resources right now that have been severely depleted and traumatized. And they have to come in and intervene to the point that that is not going to be cheap. If you are fortunate enough to leave a burn unit under your own power at some point in the future, the ongoing medical costs with that kind of damage is astronomical. Tens of millions of dollars going forward, depending on how long that individual is going to remain with us. So it's definitely not inexpensive. Now here's the silver lining to everything that I just said. The good news is if you wear it, it works. How do we know that? Many of you have probably seen this graph shown throughout the years. And what this graph shows in its most basic format is we are nowhere near resilient at 50 as we were at 25. As our body gets hurt, as we get older, it takes us longer to heal. What this graph shows, as you age and you suffer body burn, you are less resilient, and potentially you're going to have more fatalities. Someone who has a 30% body burn at 50 is not going to recover the same way if you had that 30% body burn at 25. That's pretty common sense. How we use it today is that green column. Think about it. You look at that green column, 25% or less body burn across all age categories is almost 100% survivable. Think about it this way. I can burn up a quarter of your body, get you to the right people in a reasonable period of time, and you will survive almost every time, regardless of age. How do I present that to my utility audience? I've got my leather work boots, my arc-rated jeans, my arc-rated shirt, buttoned up to the neck, rolled down, secured. I've got my hard hat, my safety glasses, my hearing protection. I've got my rubbers and my leathers. I ask you a simple question. Is there 25% of me showing? When I go back to those original slides and I talked about not being able to hurt enough of you to cause serious enough injury to cause a fatality, this is what I'm alluding to. If you wear good stuff, if you wear it properly and you've taken care of it, I can't hurt enough of you to lead to being a statistic. In 2014, we talked about the final rule finally came in, and we're now a decade plus into that final ruling. And it has helped. We have seen a dramatic drop-off in injuries. We've seen a dramatic drop-off in burns. We have seen a little bit of a flat line when it comes to fatalities, and we're looking to improve upon that as we always want to. But the biggest thing is we have seen improvement for those that are adopting it, getting good stuff, wearing it right, and taking care of it. So let's look at what we're up against. Let's take a look at your hazard. Here you have an easy video that demonstrates a very, very significant arc flash. This is 15 calories in intensity. You can see the wrong stuff. instantaneous clothing ignition, 100% on fire, severe burn injuries. By the time we get our trusty mannequin down here, buckets do not protect against arc flashes as far as, but burn the entire leg off of that mannequin. Take our mannequin, equip them in the right stuff, put them in an arc rated shirt, arc rated pant. This is an 8 cal shirt, that's an 8 cal shirt. These are 14, 18 cal jeans, 14, 18 cal jeans on our mannequin here. Completely different outcome. Literally no damage on the lower half. In the upper half, you can see where that discoloration is. That's the carbonization of the FR cotton in this case. Self-extinguishing, putting itself out. That's an 8 cal shirt and a 15 cal arc. Held up very, very well. We see a little bit of break open in the shoulder as you would expect, but that's a completely different outcome. Something that is 100% survivable to something that is potentially fatal. So into a more of a enclosed environment, something to where it's a little bit more replicable. Here we have at Kima Labs, here we have a relatively low arc flash, 4.1 calories. A lot different than the 15 calories we saw in that bucket. But you can also make the argument the intensity is still there. Why? All that energy is coming out of a box. I have focused all that energy to my electrical worker that is sitting in front of it. So how do we change this scenario? We take something that clothing ignition was instantaneous and we just changed the engineering. Now we have FR arc rated garments in front of the exact same hazard, completely different outcome. Notice our hard hat, our face shield, our balaclava, rubbers and leathers. Outfitted properly, completely different outcome. Now, a lot of folks may sit there and go, well, that's not a very big arc. Well, that's 4.5 calories, not much different than we have in our T&D lines, but let's slow it down for anybody that wants to say that this is a small arc. And I'd make an argument that 480 and above, there are no really small arcs. At 3,000 frames a second, you can now get a feel for what was coming out of that box at our replicated electrician that was in front of it. That is very, very significant. That is very, very hot, and if you're unfortunate enough to be wearing fuel, aka cotton in front of that, or 65-35, you're going to have very dramatic, severe outcomes. A reasonable estimate of incident energy tells our electrical workers a number of things. One, what is the potential incident energy they're up against, how much heat, etc. Also, how big a bomb really they're sitting in front of. I would like to know, why are labels important? As an electrical worker, I would like to know, what does this box contain? If it faults, is it a firecracker or 4 sticks of dynamite? Because I'm going to dress differently. I'm going to dress this way when I get into my bucket and I go up to my T&D lines. I may be wearing this under a 40 cal flash suit in my substation because I have electrical equipment that's 25 calories or higher. We want to know what, so that reasonable estimate is there to guide us on what to wear and how to protect ourselves if things go bad. With that, we all know we have an arc flash. It's pertinent in all the electrical equipment we're going to interact with. What if it's greater than 8 calories? Well, we talked a little bit about that. We can layer up. In fact, our standards know that as electrical workers, especially on the utility side, we are going to be up against incident energies that single layer flame-resistant arc-rated clothing is not significant enough to protect us. So how do we factor that in? 70E even gave us some guidance. In fact, they dedicated a whole annex to how to layer up to protect electrical workers against higher incident energies. So as we walk into what layering is and why we have layering and how layering can be incorporated into your program, let's introduce you to Mark to talk about what layering means and what some of the consequences may or may not be. And here's what I'm talking about. This happens to be the equipment that Mark was working on. This happens to be Mark's PPE. That's an arc-rated shirt because it's still there to talk about it. If that was a 100% cotton shirt with that kind of incident energy, there would be nothing there to talk about. So we have his PPE. We can see his rubber gloves for shock protection. The little charcoal briquette there on the right-hand side is his leather protector, and Mark's safety glasses. This is what he was wearing underneath. This is 100% cotton t-shirt in this particular case, which by all the standards and the final rule, Mark is allowed to wear. We're allowed to wear natural fibers underneath our flame-resistant arc-rated clothing. Why? They will not melt and drip and add to the injury. Now, this is the caveat that a lot of folks fail to follow up with. As long as the outer layer stays intact, you can wear non-melting garments underneath. Why is that caveat important? Because if I break open, I've now exposed lightweight, potentially ignitable fabrics to whatever residual incident energy may be left over that has not been absorbed by that outer layer breaking open. You can see in Mark's case here, we have charring. That charring occurred underneath his arc-rated shirt. Why? The incident energies were getting to the maximum performance capability of that shirt. AKA, I have a 6 cal shirt and I have a 10 cal arc. That energy is starting to push through the protective layer and now is getting into fuel, AKA cotton. We are at the cusp of that garment igniting underneath Mark's shirt. It can happen. We have a term for it in my business. It's called the chimney effect. You're burning inside your arc-rated clothing. So why do I want to talk about that? Well, first and foremost, here's Mark. Most of Mark's injuries you can see are first degree, some second degree in and around his ear. We can see where his safety glasses were on his head. You can see where the leg of his glass was. You can also see where it started to melt on the corner of his brow there. Most of that is superficial. Mark was released from hospital at that time within 72 hours. The key indicators, everything below his neckline is pristine. His arc-rated shirt performed perfectly. His cotton base layer had held up to that point, and everything was good to go in this situation. Now, what happened if it had exceeded that? On the left, you have chimney effect. You can actually see that cotton t-shirt that we were able to ignite underneath that arc-rated shirt. Also, to the right of the screen, we used high-vis yellow to demonstrate what performance fabrics, non-FR performance fabrics, we all know what the brands are, will look like underneath. In my world, we call it shrink wrap. All that heat is still passing through. When it hits 3.5 ounce polyester, aka plastic, I am going to melt it to you. So all those folks that think they can avoid the heat and the sweat and the discomfort of an arc-rated outer layer in those summer months by putting on a performance fabric, that is the consequences. We can melt that garment to you, and your arc-rated outer layer will hold up, and you will spend the next 30 to 45 days in a burn unit having plastic scrubbed out of you. So layering to meet the hazards, the basics of it. First and foremost, any garment in this environment needs to be, the outer layer needs to be arc-rated. Any garment as a base layer must at a minimum be non-meltable, aka a natural fiber. Natural fibers are wool, cotton, and silk. Better yet, have your base layer be arc-rated. You have now taken any potential fuel out of the equation. That chimney effect is no longer a concern. Melting to you, no longer a concern. And now I have nothing but additional layers of protection versus potentially introducing a meltable. This picture here, real easy. You will see a very good, very perfectly working arc-rated shirt. It just happened to be in too much energy. That is an arc-rated shirt for 8 calories. That could have been in a 15, 16 calorie arc, and it's starting to fail. On the right, unfortunately, is a young electrical worker who either wasn't trained, did not listen, or ignored the fact not to wear meltables. That's what your performance fabrics will look like 5 years post burn unit. Those scars are forever. All he did was make a mistake on what he was wearing underneath. Lastly, on the bottom there, you see an arc-rated shirt like I'm wearing, and you see a white V. The white V just simulates, I've trained all my people that they have to wear 100% cotton. Now, as a safety officer, as a safety leader, I'm conducting my meeting with my team. I have all my members in there, and I can see a sea of white Vs. Am I 100% confident 100% of the time that every one of those white Vs is 100% cotton? I have no idea. They could be 80-20, they could be 50-50, 60-40, you pick your ratio. I have no idea whether my people have introduced a meltable into a thermal environment just by looking at those white Vs, regardless of what I trained them on. Secondly, that big Harley-Davidson logo that sits on their chest of meltable inks that I can't see. So how do I eliminate that? Flame-resistant arc-rated base layers. Now, all the top brands today will have identification at the neckline. So instead of looking for white Vs, I'm either going to see triangles, I'm either going to see dragons, I'm going to see FR, I'm going to see some other indicator that this now is a protective layer and I've removed any meltables and or potential fuel, aka cotton, from that equation. And it just makes it super easy now as a safety professional to know that my team is better protected. Which base layers are right for you? That's up to how you want to implement them. We can get into a lot of discussions on layering here at a different time, but just know that from the mid bicep down to the wrist, I'm unprotected. So that means my outer layer is still, in this case, 8 calories, even though this is a 6-calorie shirt, and even though together I'm 24 calories when tested, that only counts when I have long sleeves. I'm 24 calories at the chest. If I was a rubber sleeve utility, now I've got 24 calories of protection plus my rubber sleeves. Once I took those sleeves off, I'm only 8 cals because I don't have that additional layer. And there's some more nuance to get into, but that's the basics. Having selected the proper stuff, all the regulations require we train you how to properly don and doff that. What does that mean? That's our fancy way of saying putting it on and taking it off. I train you on all these steps. You demonstrate that you understand these steps. We document it. It goes in your file. Now we've taken care of 1910-132. So how does that look? This is how to properly interface a flame-resistant arc-rated shirt in the field. Unfortunately, this is how y'all interface a flame-resistant arc-rated shirt in the field. There are pathways to injury here because why? You're going to unbutton, you're going to untuck, you're going to roll those sleeves up even when you're quote unquote working de-energized. Then when you get back in the bucket or you go to interact with that pad mount transformer, you forget to roll them down, you forget to button them up, and we see the injuries. Thermal energy is very, very easy for forensic folks. Why? Where you got hurt was where you were not protected. How do I know that? When you're sitting in the burn unit and you're trying to tell your boss that, oh no, I had my sleeves rolled down, and you've got 2nd and 3rd degree burns from your wrist up or where your rubbers and leathers were not met, that's because you weren't protected. When you have 2nd degree burns in a big V shape, that means you weren't buttoned up. So thermal energy does not let you get away with where you weren't protected. I always get asked, and I always like to tell folks, what can go wrong here? I can have a very, very good, very, very well-funded, very, very well-trained flame-resistant arc-rated clothing program, and I can jeopardize it by what I put on my head. Is that hat flame-resistant? It's now the outermost layer. Is that ball cap flame-resistant? Is that watch cap flame-resistant? Is that skull cap flame-resistant? Is that bandana flame-resistant? And here's where it can come into play. One, all that heat can still go into my hard hat. If I'm wearing a meltable skull cap, it can melt to my head. We had an incident at one of our utilities, pad mount transformer. Beautiful sunny day like we have here in South Carolina today. Where's my hard hat? No overhead hazard. It was in the cab of my truck. I was in the burn unit 3 hours later. Why? 2nd and 3rd degree burns because my ball cap melted to my head. Imagine having a $1,200 a year, very well funded, very well thought out flame-resistant arc-rated clothing program, and I jeopardized it by what I put on my head. The other picture is that's a very expensive, very good, very protective brown duck coat. What's that hoodie? That hoodie is now the outermost layer. Is it part of the program? Then we're fine. It's arc-rated. is if it's not part of the program, if it's just the hoodie I grabbed off the back of the door and threw underneath because it's going to be a little colder today than it was yesterday, do I remember when I take off that brown duck coat? When it goes from -20 at 7 o'clock in the morning to +20 at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and I take that brown duck coat off, do I remember that that's a non-FR hoodie? Also, if it's non-FR and it's on the back of my neck there, that's potential hazard too. Why? When we have an arcing fault, every test that you see, for the most part, we use highly trained mannequins. They're highly trained not to move. We're going to move. So when I have that arcing fault and I turn my head away, even if I'm in that bucket or if I'm in that substation and I turn away, what did I just turn into the hazard? Potentially a big hunk of fuel. So we want to make sure that we have every possible consideration, because these are just subtle areas to where a very, very good program can go wrong. I love that my guys are representing. I love to see my triangles out in the field. I have zero idea if they're safe. The way they're deployed right now, I don't know what that undergarment, if it's arc rated or not. I don't know if it's arc rated to a reasonable estimate of the incident energy. Also, we do see arcs run down poles, so even though they have distance, they're not necessarily free from the hazard. The gentleman behind clearly displays what can happen. If that arc goes to the ground and that hot air comes up, it's going to blouse that untucked shirt and it's going to go find what's underneath. And if we have a lightweight 3-ounce, 100% cotton base layer, that could potentially ignite. So these are just areas where things can go wrong with very, very good, well thought out programs. The last piece of the equation, we've selected good stuff. We're wearing it properly. Now we have to take care of our PPE. And can we do that in the field? Absolutely. Can we do that at home? Absolutely. Can we have a third party take care of it? Absolutely. Those are all options. The good thing is today's flame resistant arc rated clothing from the top brands in our marketplace today, they're very, very hard to mess up. So what are our standards and what's our guidance? Follow the manufacturer's guidelines. Real easy. Where do you find those? Those are all in the labels that you all don't read. And that's fine, because as I said, very, very hard to mess this stuff up. These are best practices. You will not find these written in the final rule. You will not find these in any of the standards. So what are the best practices? Most people know them. No bleach, no fabric softeners, right? The other sneaky one is no peroxide. Peroxide and chlorine weaken the fibers. The fibers are doing all the work in the hazard. So let's not weaken the fibers. Fabric softeners, they can mask FR performance because they can accumulate over time, so let's not use those. If we happen to accidentally have some fabric softener, either in liquid form or in dryer sheets, just rewash them. It's an accumulation effect over time, so if you happen to do it once or twice, just rewash them. It'll come out. You have not taken away the FR properties of your stuff. Wash them separately. This is not to interfere with the FR properties. This is primarily just good hygiene. Don't bring your work stuff and mix it up with your family stuff. It's more of a hygiene issue. Liquid detergent for the best results. Avoid the hottest temperatures. For tough stains, we can use stain remover. And for tougher stains, you can send them to a dry cleaner. That's all perfectly fine with all the top fabrics today. Bottom line is, whatever you see in your laundry room today, of all those items there, that liquid detergent in the middle is really all you need. Avoid the starches, avoid chlorine, avoid peroxide, and avoid fabric softener. Those are the biggies. How much staining is too much? Well, the good thing is, if those are stained and clean, your FR properties are all intact. Staining in and of themselves does not indicate a loss of FR properties. Now, staining during the workday, if those are hydrocarbons, if those are potentially fuel, the one on the left, let's get out of the hazard. Let's not have you interacting anywhere in that minimum approach distance. Better yet, get you out of that garment if that is secondary accelerant. The one on the right, through the ordinary every all day work stuff, you're going to get greases, you're going to get oils, you're going to get splatterings of stuff on there. In and of themselves, those are going to be hot spots. There's still plenty of fabric around to do what's necessary to protect you. I would not be as concerned as I would be with the one on the left. Repairing and replacing. This is a tough one for me because yes, we allow it. We allow you to repair the integrity of a piece of PPE. That's a little tough for me to process as a safety guy. The standards allow for it. They don't give you a lot of guidance, so let me give you some guidance when it comes to repairing. Keep an old shirt and keep an old pant because you're going to need light fabrics. Then you're going to have to go to the big shopping center in the cloud, order yourself up some FR thread in the colors that you desire, and then you're going to use those old fabrics to make those repairs. Well, what repairs can I make and what repairs can't I make? Well, first and foremost, real easy, that's thread bearing on those elbows. You have worn through that fabric, that cannot be repaired, that garment needs to be replaced. On the far right, we have a tear. It looks like it's on the seam, but man, that's a lot of manual repair that we've got to make there. Probably don't want to do that, replace that pant. The one in the middle, I've got a small tear on the shoulder on a seam. I could probably make that repair. I've got a small hole on that elbow. I can probably make a patch, and that's it. When is a garment okay? And the okay sign is for 1/4 or smaller size hole and 1 3-inch tear. One of those per garment, then retire them. And you won't find that written anywhere. You won't find that in any standard. This is a best practice. This is to maintain the integrity of that PPE going forward. The mindset I want you to start evolving to is think of your fall harness. How many times are you going to climb in your career and not use that fall harness? Hopefully every single time. How many times are you going to climb into your flame-resistant arc-rated clothing and not use it for what I built it for? Hopefully every time. Now, we don't allow rips, tears, or frays and faulty D-rings on our fall harnesses, do we? But we're more than willing to have rips, tears, frays, and torn up FR PPE. Let's try to avoid that. Let's try to mitigate that. So the okay sign, 1 hole and 1 tear per garment, then retire it. When should we retire garments? Garments are ill-fitting. Either you've gotten too big or they've gotten too small. Pick one. Retire the garment. Closures, that is your snaps, that is your buckles, that is your Velcro, that is your buttons. You start losing those or those are not functioning, that is key to that PPE protecting you as well as it can. Let's replace those garments. Aesthetics. Everybody, especially in the utility industry today, is customer facing. That customer facing may be as simple as going to the local gas station and filling up and walking inside and getting a hot dog. Your company logo is on there. Let's make sure that all those garments represent your company as best they can. So are they thread bearing? Are they worn, abraded, excessively ripped, torn, stained, etc.? Let's be upgrading those from a customer standpoint. So a couple stories real quick and we're getting close to wrapping up here. On your right here, we have failure to verify for lack of voltage. We had all our PPE on. We know this from the accident report. We know this from the pictures from the fire department. We know that his lock was on the back panel. He had locked out the piece of equipment that he was going to work on that day. He went to that piece of equipment, took all his PPE off. It was on the little rolling cart that he had along with his insulated tools as he went from job to job. We had his hard hat, his face shield, his rubbers, his leathers, his hearing protection, and in this case we had his arc-rated coverall. It was all off. Why? He was working de-energized now. He had locked out the piece of equipment. Unfortunately, the failure to verify he was not on the piece of equipment he had locked out. It was in fact energized. When he went into that equipment, the corresponding arc flash. Remember when I said about third and fourth, fifth? Fourth and fifth is on that hand. Just think about it. The most fantastic piece of engineering you have as an electrical worker is probably this tool. How much tissue do you have? And you can take a look at your own hand. How much tissue do you have in that hand before you're into muscle and bone? Not a lot. That hand is not a hand 3 days later. Those are all third-degree burns on that forearm, second degree into that bicep. That career is over. On the left, we have what's called a legacy sticker that adorns every hard hat. Southern California Utility, July 2007, surface level switching gear. I have a journeyman and I have a helper energize a portion of that switching gear, button up the little Quonset hut, done for the day. Day 2, journeyman 2, helper 2 join journeyman 1 and helper 1 because not only do they have to finish this job, they've got 3 additional jobs now assigned to them for the rest of the day. So we have some time pressure. Unfortunately, and ironically, the on-site safety person pulled journeyman 1 and helper 1 away from the job before they had their tailgate. During that tailgate, what would they have talked about? Potentially what? The status of the equipment, potentially what PPE they need, what tools they need, what other conditions, whatever that JSA is, and all those boxes that need to be checked and verified, that discussion does not happen. But because they're under time constraint, journeyman 2 and helper 2 now go into the job. The helper was in the process of putting a little fan up in the corner because it's July, Southern California. It's hot. We don't know exactly what the journeyman did, but when they worked de-energized, they were allowed to be unbuttoned, untucked, sleeves rolled up, 100% cotton company t-shirt, royal blue. Because remember my white V discussion? Royal blue now gives me a better indicator that I'm wearing the company issued correct shirt, 100% cotton. Again, we don't know what the interaction was, but 56 years old, 6 months from retirement, died on the operating table. The corresponding arc flash immediately ignited his 100% cotton t-shirt. He died from those injuries in the operating table. That's his legacy to his brothers and his sisters in his union and his utility, always buttoned, tucked, and rolled. Until you personally verify that that gun is not loaded, that gun is loaded. A little bonus here, we have a couple extra minutes. Standards alone are very, very rarely enough. We have to get a little bit deeper, and especially in the utility world when it comes to rain gear and vests. Arc rated vests have to be ASTM 1506 and they have to have an arc rating. An FR vest is not good enough. Can you get an FR vest that's not arc rated? Yes. Be very, very cautious. Same with rain gear. Your rain gear has to be ASTM 1891. That is the standard to test that your rain gear will in fact perform in an arc flash. Can you get FR rain gear that's not been tested to an arc flash? Yes. What's the difference? One set of rain gear is about $140 to $150. Another set of rain gear is between $400 and $500. Guess which one you need. Make sure your outermost layer has indeed been tested to your hazard. We see this compromised all the time. I won't take up too much time reading this for you, but it contradicts itself 3 different times that it's FR, that it's non-FR, that it does not have an arc rating. That being said, the last line is the FR properties will diminish with laundering. That's literally rain gear you can't get wet. So imagine having that in your department. Lastly, on the upside there, that is a HRC2, old terminology. Today it would be Cat 2. I'd argue it's not even Cat 2. Why? There is no such thing as a short sleeve, flame resistant, arc rated shirt in your trade. Your livelihood is literally from your wrist to the elbow. And that has to be the outermost layer because it's high vis. You can't have a high vis base layer. That does not make sense. Your career is wrist to elbow. It should never be unprotected. So as we look through these things and we come to the end, real simple. You've heard the mantra throughout my presentation here today. Buy good stuff, wear it properly and take care of it, and it will take care of you, arguably on the worst working day of your life. So one last thing to think about. I always like to end up with just a little something to take away. Do you have stop work authority? When I do this in a live audience, real easy. All the hands pop up. So what's the next question? Do you have the courage to use it? I use this example. This is from the national championship game just this past season. This is our Notre Dame Fighting Irish against the other guys. The other guys happen to be Ohio State. I want you to watch a young man recognize something is wrong on his job site. Then I want you to ask the question, is he brave enough to stop work?
Second and 5, play fake, Allen flips it, Smith's got it, and the freshman just losses in as the Buckeyes score to answer the Irish.
Now, what would stop work authority look like on this job site? Be the timeout. That young man goes timeout. Instead of jumping up and down, trying to tell everybody we've got the wrong defense for this play, he goes timeout, that play doesn't happen. Now, I'm not saying Ohio State wouldn't have scored 2 plays later, but they wouldn't have scored on that play. And trust me, as a junior cornerback at the University of Notre Dame, he has stop work authority. He just didn't, in this case, have the courage to use it. And I know that's easily said than done. And I know no one wants to be that guy on the job site who's labeled with always, doing this, doing that. We're not getting home anytime soon now, thanks. And there's all that negativity that comes from it. We need to reverse that. So with that, that's my time today. I want to thank Brent. I want to thank Bierermeters. I want to thank our folks at ECOS. And hopefully everybody got a little bit of something out of this today. So thank you all for your time.